Hey Reaper Crew, what's up? So, back again with some new content. I hope you're enjoying the content so far, and if you do, please hit like and subscribe to the channel. It really does support me and help this channel grow. I think given the time put into this channel over the past and the content available on the channel, we do deserve to push this a little further and make it a little more well known. Firstly, I'd like to say commiserations to Taylor Hawkins, who died last week. Those who don't know, this was the drummer of the band The Foo Fighters. And now into the story, guys. This one is called I Hate Leaving My Dog Alone at Home. I tapped on the narrow on my screen and watched the camera pan across the living room. I continued tapping until I got the notification that my camera had reached the maximum swivel on that side. Then I tapped the arrow to swivel the other way. As the camera rotated, I caught sight of a black, curly tail. There she was. Little sparks of joy bloomed in my heart. I panned the camera down and saw her, staring straight at the screen. Her beautiful, adorable face cocked to one side, her soft golden eyes and were wide open. I looked around the train carriage, then pressed the talk button on the app and said as softly as possible, "Hey girl." Zepto's ears pricked up, and she sat excitedly, her tail wagging so hard that her little bum moved along with it. She then started sniffing about near the camera. Looking confused, I giggled out loud, then quickly caught myself. The pup seemed to be doing well at home alone. That was a relief. I was surprised she hadn't torn everything to bits. But then again, I'd placed everything she could possibly rip apart out of her reach. I'd soon be home, I whispered into the phone, and watched her tail wagging hard. I'd just got a pup for 2 months, and had never left her alone before. Partially because I had people I could call over to help watch her when I was out. And mostly, I just really love staying home. In fact, I think I left the house only twice in the last 2 months. I would say I need a life, but I've got a pup, so I reckon I already got an awesome one. When I got home, Zepto's bark and whine started the minute I stepped off the lift. I could hear her scratching the door. I flung it open dramatically, and she leapt up my thighs, pawing, tail wagging, trying to lick my face. I bent down and let her lick me all over my face. I need to wash my face after anyway. I've been staying alone in this apartment for the past half a year, and I finally got the best companion and roommate I've ever had. Zepto was a handsome, but she was worth every struggle and accommodation. As a freelancer with the internet, it was easy for me to never have to leave her alone, except for times when clients insisted on face-to-face meetings. I hated those. I washed and refilled Zepto's water and dropped a couple of ice cubes in it. I took the ice tray to fill up, but it was already half full. I must have filled it last night. I sat down at my desk and got to work. I like to do up my designs right after decisions, while the main points were fresh in my head. I lost track of time, and only looked up when I heard what I heard, a cupboard slam. I sat up, and my heart started to race. That sounded like a kitchen cupboard, which Zepto would not be able to reach. I entered my stationery holder, and holding one of my pens, clutched it tightly in my hand, and went to check out the noise. I carefully turned the corner into the kitchen, and peered past the wall. No one. I breathed a sigh of relief. Nevertheless, when I returned to my bedroom, Zepto following, I locked the door before going to bed. The next day, I had to leave the house again, this time for a short dinner meet-up with a client. My heart ached as Zepto scuffed the doorway as I left, closing her gate. She stared at me, whining, bye girl, I'll be back soon, I love you." I patted her on the head one last time, then steeled myself to close the door. I heard her whining all the way to the lift, breaking my heart. On the way to dinner, I checked the camera. She was still at the door, whining for the whole half-hour ride to dinner. She lay by the door occasionally, getting up to sniff and whine. It was heart-wrenching to watch. I needed to end that meeting early. Unfortunately for me, the edits and feedback given by my client were comprehensive and thorough. It seemed like everything he had wanted from the start was no longer applicable. Something bright and fun became something preferably more elegant and clean, bold, loud font became swirling fancy fonts, and so on and so forth. It was dark by the time the meeting was done. I rushed out of the restaurant, flagged a cab. It was about to take the extra time of public transport, with poor Zepto waiting anxiously. Once a cab, I activated the pet cam. She wasn't near the door. Well, at least she finally got comfortable and went to do her home thing. I panned the camera and swiveled slowly across the room. My heart seized as the back of the figure came into view in the corner of the screen. I swiveled the camera a little more so that it was now centered. I felt nauseated. My stomach bottomed out. I couldn't make out the figure's legs, just long black hair down his back. The arms and body clothed in what seemed to be a ragged white shirt, floating it seemed. Fear pricked my neck. I almost asked the cabbie to take a look, to make sure I wasn't crazy, but I decided against it. Perhaps if I didn't acknowledge it, if no one else did, it would disappear. Then the head stared and started to turn. The side of its pale face appeared, showing dark eyes. Then the head turned completely, and both of its eyes, which I saw, were dark red, staring directly at the camera, at me. I gasped and switched the app off. "Hold on a moment," I told the cab. I considered going to my friend's place instead, getting reinforcements before heading back. But then I braced myself for that image. But I let out a breath I'd been holding when I saw it was no longer there. I took a few more deep breaths, then forced my fingers to press the arrow, making the camera swivel around. There Zepto was, safe and sound. I sighed with relief. My darling was fine. So far, she was lying on the couch and nuzzling against something in the thin air, it seemed. I looked closely. blinking my eyes repeatedly to get a clearer view. Then I thought I made out a white fuzzy image of a thigh, a leg Zepto was nestling against. That thing. The cab reached at that moment, and I shout out, nearly forgetting to pay. I quickly threw down the cash, asked the cabbie to keep the change and started running. That fucking thing was not going to hurt my dog. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge coward. I'm terrified of anything supernatural, ghosts, spirits, demons. The idea of encountering them usually paralyzes me. Just talking about it then makes me break into a cold sweat. But tonight, a deep blazing rage fueled me when I thought about that fucking thing harming my precious Zepto. The sweetest dog you'll ever meet. The dog who loves me so deeply, whom I love. That rage somehow dulled my fears, and all I could feel was tingling current as I jabbed the lift button. Multiple times the doors closed. I was heading up to save my doggy. At that time I fumbled with my keys, my hand shaking from adrenaline. There was no sound from within. I panicked. My hand shook more. Finally I got the key in and turned it. As I did, I heard a familiar sound of Zepto barking, and gave me a heartfelt prayer of thanks to the universe. My dog was fine. I opened the door, ready to grab Zepto and run. Zepto leapt at me excitedly, wagging her tail so hard her butt was once again wiggling with joy. She licked and nipped at me excitedly. I bent down and picked her up, despite the fact she was growling and being a big pup, kind of heavy. I nuzzled my face to hers, then quickly looked around. Nothing out of the ordinary. I walked in, still leaving the door open, ready to run. I checked out every part of the house. No one else was there. I didn't sense anything off, other than the fear emanating from my taunt nerves. I began to relax. I placed Zepto gently on the floor and went to get a glass of water. Funny how thirsty I could get when I'm terrified. I closed the fridge door and poured the glass from the cold water jar, then looked up to see its eyes burrowing straight into mine. I screamed, backed away and dropped the glass. Zepto ran to me and looked up concerned and confused. It didn't seem to understand what I was worried about. Then the thing, still staring into my soul, swooshed forward in a rush, and I felt a force shove me down onto the floor. I fell back and plopped down hard on the glass pieces on the kitchen floor. I gasped from the pain. All the while my heart juddered in fear. That was then the Zepto growled. The thing looked surprised and stared at Zepto. No, Zepto, run. Zepto ignored my commands. Zepto continued to growl, a hair-raised sound I had never heard from her before, not around me. Then the thing stepped back, an odd look on its face. It took a while to register. It hurt. It looked hurt. Zepto pounced forward, growling, snapping and snarling. It took a step back away from me, then tilted its head and reached its hand out to Zepto, seeming to be appealing to her. Zepto snapped at its hand. It pulled away, shocked on its feature. Then it put its hands down and lowered its head and faded from sight. Still shocked, I sat on the kitchen floor, bleeding in many places. Zepto ran up to me and started licking at my wounds. I had to lift her from the shuffle to the living room to avoid her cutting her paws on the glass. We sat together on the couch for a while as I bled. Then I held Zepto close and cried into her fur, tears of both fear and gratitude. My friend drove over that night and helped me clear and tend my wounds. I didn't say a word to her about what had happened, just that I dropped a glass and fallen, but she seemed to sense my fear, and something was wrong. We stayed up the entire night before watching movies, with Zepto curled up in between us on the couch. Zepto laying her soft fuzzy head on my lap, my nerves began to unwind. I stroked her head gently, feeling more love for her than before, something I hadn't thought possible. We moved out of the apartment since the very next day. I packed my essentials, Zepto's food, toys and bowls, and so on. Then we got out of there. We stayed at bed and breakfast for a week, until I found another apartment. I never went back to the apartment, just got movers to do the rest. I left that pet camera behind too. Somehow, it felt tainted. I got myself a brand new one and set it up. It worked just fine. I hope to never have to leave Zepto home alone again, but life happens, and if I ever do, I'd be monitoring that camera the whole time. If needs be, I've got a shoe cupboard filled with a palifa of freaky, spirit-warding stuff I found on the internet. We would protect each other, Zepto and I.